Hey, welcome back, everybody. Time once again for another episode of Living Hope, our weekly journey for those living with pancreatic cancer. As we detail and document the real life stories of those really dealing with this deadly disease on a daily basis, and the information and hope that we hope we can pass on about this disease. That's what we're talking about today with Roberta Luna, who's still trying to wrap her head around everything else that's going here in Southern California. We're calling it cancer in a time of crisis, right?
That's part of it, I guess you could say. Yes, yes. Yeah, sorry we have to do that, but we got to keep everybody informed.
That's a headline. We got to grab that headline. So
there you go.
Who'd you bring back? You brought back another survivor here today.
Yeah, I did. We're excited to welcome back Rob Panacci. He was he is a 5-year cancer survivor, and I would like to invite our audience to watch or listen to Rob's previous episodes on OC Talk Radio or most podcast
Did you
channels.
say Panacci? I have it spelled differently here.
You know me and my names, okay? Just
I don't see any C's in there.
There is a C.
Panacci.
Panacci. Okay. Did I say Panacci?
You said Panacci.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have a friend, and that's their last name, so that's probably what was sticking in my mind. Panacci. I'm sorry. Rob, forgive me. We do this, I think, every time I mess up your name, so I'm so sorry.
Problem. I'm just happy to be here.
Well, thank you. We're happy to have you here. Thank you for being here today. We do appreciate it. Like I said, there's so much going on here that it's nice to have you on, and we'll talk a bit, but I did want to talk a little bit about clinical trials, because I believe January is Clinical Trials Awareness Month. So just a little bit, and if I remember correctly, you didn't do a clinical trial, or you were able to. I don't remember exactly.
I didn't have to do a clinical trial. I went into the full Farinox protocol for chemo and then radiation, and fortunately everything worked out. I think clinical trials are extremely important. I think, it is something that anybody dealing with cancer needs to be looking into, specifically because sometimes that's the easiest way in. I know, things here with the medical system, when I talk to friends in Canada, it can be difficult to get timely type appointments to do regular things. And sometimes those protocols and those therapies aren't always effective. There are plenty of clinical trials that have gone far enough along that are waiting for full approval or something that people should take a look into, at least explore. I know PanCan does a significant amount. The Pancreatic Cancer Action Network does a significant amount of work and investment in these trials. I believe my understanding was last year they didn't start anything new, but they were funding previously approved clinical trials.
Can I jump in and ask one question, or maybe one clarification that Roberta's pointed out and other things here? Popular misconception, I think, is that I'm not going to do a clinical trial because I'm sick and they might give me a placebo. I need something real. I'm not going to take the chance I get nothing, but you always get something. It's a question of, you still get a standard of care. It's whether or not you also get this experimental drug, right? It's not like you come back with nothing.
Yeah, and I think if that's something that is bothering you, that level of communication needs to be very detailed. Getting involved in these trials, you really should try and understand everything they're doing and what their protocols are in terms of how they're documenting the information. It's not for everyone, but sometimes when all other options have been exhausted, it is a place you need to be looking to see, what else is there, right? If you, one of the things that's been happening over the last month or so, I myself have been doing sort of a lot of looking at the world of cancer, right? Different things that are going on out there, and where the dollars are going, and that's important to me because unfortunately, the reality is science goes where the money goes. So if something is deemed important enough by being funded and by being reviewed, then chances are it's going to get the support and the necessary things that it needs to progress and to be an effective treatment. But yeah, you're right. That could hold a lot of people back, saying, I don't know what I'm getting. You need to be clear about that up front. And I think that's part of the discussion that you have with the clinical therapy teams, to say, here are my priorities. Because Unfortunately, you might have different priorities. There might be some that are struggling to survive, some who have reached a point where survival is going to be a little bit more difficult, but maybe they can help the research community, or the research community can help them to see what else is available.
And Roberta, tell your story about your dad, because you always bring that up about his willingness to do it and their reluctance to use them.
Yeah, my dad was diagnosed in '98, and unfortunately only survived two weeks. But during that 2 weeks, he told the doctors, we talked to the doctors about doing chemotherapy or something, because my dad was like, maybe it won't help me, but maybe somebody will learn from it. And it was an odd, I thought, response. Is the doctor said, we don't want to waste on chemo on somebody who's going to die.
Mhm.
And it was just like, it was gut wrenching to be told that, when my dad was willing to be, if you want to say, a guinea pig, but he was willing to be the experimental, give it a try and see what, maybe what the side effects are, or does it help at all, or what can you learn from using me? And they didn't want to. But his doctor was not. We won't go there, but anyway,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So it's difficult, but for clinical trials, it is extremely important, because what people don't understand, that's the only way we can get our drugs for treatment, is to go through that clinical trial. I learned from a guest who came that her husband actually did a clinical trial that was very successful for me, and it was just like, I mean, I appreciate so much what he had to go through, but to get that drug approved, it's the only way, unfortunately, that we can get it. And I wish more people would do it, and doctors would offer it up for more, let people know about it, and address these myths, because as far as getting the placebo, I don't know what other cancer groups do, but for pancreatic cancer, you do not get a placebo. You will at least get the standard of care at that moment. So it's something to look into. And I don't know, did your doctors offer it to you, or did they just feel that there just wasn't anything available at that time for you?
I think based on the timing of mine, and where they caught it, uh, the doctors at Mayo thought that standard protocol could be effective. Um, so with the FOLFIRINOX, I think FOLFIRINOX was only approved in 2010. So really, it's fairly young as far as therapies go as well. And I think the gemcitabine was even 2014. But a lot of these therapies are new, and the world of cancer research, as I'm really starting to understand. Sometimes you don't know until you start going down those rabbit holes. Uh, there's a lot going on out there, and sometimes it may be a question of, is the chemo correct? Is the level of chemo correct? Is there a new medicine? The type of transparency necessary to get those out, I think, is needs to be improved. First thing, we didn't think that we needed to go down that route, because chemo started to have a good effect relatively early on. Within a few months, we started to see my tumor shrink down. It started to shrink away from my main abdominal artery. So they were fairly confident that getting through the chemo and then the radiation should even support that more. So it wasn't a path that we had to go down. If they had come back and said, "Hey, chemo's not working. There's nothing stronger. Do you want to try this?" I know that most likely, I would have gone down that path, because my priority was getting better. And that's not to say someone who doesn't take it, that's not their priority, but it would be something I'd be willing to risk. Age is definitely a factor. Some of these therapies, it can be very difficult on older people, but they're just as important.
Yeah, it is, and I agree. And thank you. For a lot of this, you were talking about research and funding. Advocacy is an important part, and I'm sure what inspired you to become an advocate, of course, is because you're a survivor. But was there something really detrimental that made you thought, I really have to get out and do this?
Um, I, per our previous discussions, one of the things that came out when I completed my surgery and got to some level of feeling better, because it takes you some time after the Whipple surgery to feel better. Um, I sat down with my wife and I basically said, I don't want to talk about cancer anymore. I don't want to hear about cancer. I don't want people asking me how I'm doing. I was at a point where I just wanted to move on with my life and get to some level of normalcy, right? So for a long time I was in denial, and I don't know if denial is the right word, but I just wanted to move forward. And it wasn't until 2023, end of 2023, that I thought, you know, I'm making progress. Because up to that point, I had had my surgery in 2020. It was like every 3 months you're waiting for the next shoe to drop to say, oh, we found some more cells, or we found some more. But every time I got a test, it was, okay, your numbers are good. Your numbers are getting better. And then it got to that point where I said, I can't just sit back and be quiet about this. I didn't understand when people would say, wow, you know, you're still alive. You had pancreatic cancer, you're still alive. And it didn't really hit me until that point when I said, yeah, you know what? I'm lucky to be alive. Like and we'll go through some of the numbers this year. I mean, you can't stay quiet about it. You need to be telling people that there's hope. You need to be reinforcing the fact that there are opportunities out there to at least try and get better. You know, we look at the numbers now, and if you don't mind, I'd like to go through some of those.
Sure.
So, you know, the numbers from PanCan this year, and I'm going to round, but you know, they're expecting roughly 67,000 people to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer this year. They're also expecting 52,000 deaths from pancreatic cancer this year. And that's pretty significant in the realm of cancer when you consider pancreatic cancer is one of the top 10 cancers that does not have a very good survival rate. It has the worst survival rate of the top 10 cancers, being under 20%. So that's pretty significant. And I actually read a stat this weekend that absolutely floored me. So this year, they're expecting roughly 200,000 men to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. Out of those 200,000 men, unfortunately, 30,000 will succumb to prostate cancer. But that's out of 200,000 versus 52,000 who are going to succumb to pancreatic cancer out of 67,000 diagnosed. That number's also gone up 1.5%. The number of incidents occurring year over year, there's actually a 1.5% increase. Now, many cancers see increases, but 1.5% is pretty significant when you think of, you know, you're adding that. And the survival rate didn't increase this year. So every year we look for, you know, that improvement of survival past 5 years. And there's been good progress over the last couple. We hit 13 last year, but this year it stayed at 13. So the survival rate isn't increasing. The incident rate is going up. The probability of someone dying because of it, I'm going to say dying. I always, you know, I kind of couch it with succumb, or, you know, people are dying, right? Because there's not the proper things in place that we're doing. So when I look at that, you know, what's happening, my father's gone through prostate cancer twice now. He's actually still going through it now. You know, but he has what he has to get through it. And, you know, at his age, there's other certain circumstances that you got to consider as well. But there's hope. He's not hit with, I got prostate cancer, I'm going to be dead in a year. I got prostate cancer, I got treatments I can go to, etc. I get screening for prostate cancer, so, you know, the doctors can keep on top of it, versus pancreatic cancer, where there's no standard screening process. I read a couple of things recently that talked about how the false positives in screening in pancreatic cancer lead to, you know, mass hysteria or whatever. That's ridiculous. If I can figure out that I got pancreatic cancer earlier rather than later, at stage 2 or stage 3 versus stage 4, when it's most likely spread to your lymph nodes, spread to your liver, your bladder, wherever, I'd rather know. Right? But we don't have those in place today. So I think that's a huge challenge. And when you look at, and I don't want to get political here, but when you look at some of the recent executive orders where funding has been stopped, and there needs some clarification here, right? Because one, it's an executive order. There's got to be some exploration. There's going to be, but in the meantime, it's caused a lot of hysteria where people are saying, well, what's happening with my cancer funding? What's happening with my research funding in this particular disease? I believe the number is 80% of all cancer research comes from government funding. So you think of all the millions of dollars that different groups come and raise, right? We rely on the federal government to fund programs to look for treatments and advancements in this disease and in whatever form it shows up in to try and improve that. So when you come out and say, we're stopping those discussions, we're stopping those meetings, we're stopping any research until we evaluate, I'm not going to be an apologist, but I understand sometimes when you want to come in, you want to take a look and see, maybe I can do this better. Great. Change it when you have something better. In the meantime, there are people who are dependent on the research dollars, who are dependent on the focus and attention that it's getting through the funding that it gets. Because the reality is, science is going to follow the money. And I'm a bit more optimistic than most to think that, you know, I believe a good part of these dollars are going to come back into the system. But in the meantime, you've signaled to the medical and research community, hey, we're reevaluating this. Well, if I'm a scientist or a chemist or whatever, I'm not going to sit back and say, okay, well, I just won't work until they figure it out. I might go look to do something else. If I'm vested in it and I'm really passionate about it, you know, I may not. But the signal is more worrisome to say that if you get enough resources to move away from the focus and attention that cancer is actually getting, how soon can you bring them all back? And that's what worries me more than most. It's amazing that during the inauguration, when you looked up at the stage, you had leaders of companies that make their money on communication. Yet you release executive orders with either very little information, rather than update the websites of the different impacted communities to say, you know, what is going on, you just shut them down. I think that's kind of the wrong way to go. I think communication is more important than ever. Which leads sort of to the next part, is to say, okay, well, what do we do, right? Do we just sit back and wait? No, I think that's actually the wrong approach. And I think the signal is clear to anybody to start up their critical thinking, start up their phone dialing, pick up the phone, contact your state senator. You know, what's going on with this? What does it really mean? Where can I actually find information that explains exactly what's going to happen over the next 6 months? And I think that's a great way to exercise your right to voice your opinion, to speak out and say, there's a lot of people who are dependent and who are going to be dependent in future years on research, on improvements in therapies, on improvements in technologies, everything from, you know, how we can get an intelligent port in your body so that we can get the chemo in as efficiently as and effectively as possible, as well as monitoring your vital signs to make sure you're doing fine, to you know, what happens to a person who is in palliative care? How do you make life as comfortable and as possible at that point? So there's a wide variety of things that are dependent on this research, and we can't just let it wait while one person or a small group decides what its fate is. I think this is where we need to come in as citizens, exercise our rights to voice our opinions to our senators, to our congresspeople, and say, you need to make this clear what's happening. You need to make a decision.
What can we do? I got to jump in. As an average Joe, you're saying contact your representative, certainly a start. But what can we do for general public to light a fire on this topic? I think of, and I don't get political, have people say one way or another, but the last president's son died of cancer. And early on he said, let's let's get behind this like the moon program. Let's make a moonshot. Let's try and really make a dent in all cancers and research. I don't know how far they got or how much money was that, but I don't hear that kind of conversation going on.
You just made a great point there. I don't know how far they got or what they did.
Yeah.
And I think that's more important now than ever, is that accountability needs to be clear. The communication around those efforts need to be clear. If you're going to, you own a company, right? You own Roberta's company, and Roberta's company says, we're looking for investors, and the investors come in and they give you a ton of money to go do your work, and you don't tell them what you're doing. Investors are going to be pretty upset.
Right.
And we don't think about government in that way, which we need to start. And we need to really ramp up our efforts around that, is say, great, love the fact that you're going to take a moonshot and solve cancer. What are you doing about it? What has happened about it? And same thing now. I mean, that I believe is the most effective path, is to let your representatives know, and not just once, and not with a form letter, right?
I think back, and this is a horrible analogy, so feel free to say you're crazy here. Roberta will jump in here, but we see problems, hunger, poverty around the world, other sorts of cancers. It seems to be a never-ending thing. It never goes away. It might get better, but it never goes away. And I just think the public, myself included, gets sort of burned out on it. Oh my goodness, more money, more advocacy, more, here we go again. And you've been talking about this 20 years, 30 years, it's just, unless you're directly affected, then absolutely. Then if you know somebody you're directly involved in, absolutely you become passionate and involved in it. For the general public, did they just get burned out and overwhelmed? And
well, I think the burnout is a real problem. I think what also happens is, and I'm going to be blunt, is I think we become complacent, and we say, oh, well, we just saw a headline that said, $60 billion is going to fight this particular problem.
they got it covered. Yeah, right.
Right. So you think $60 billion, that's a pretty significant amount of investment. Something good's got to come of that. And then we forget about it again until, someone changes that dollar amount, or someone comes out and says, well, we have no idea where this money went, because that has happened. And that's where I think that advocacy needs to come in place, where we need to be speaking with the holders of the dollars, because at the end of the day, we're providing the dollars. What did you do with it?
Right.
Exactly how many? I know when I used to be in the corporate world, right? One of my key roles was to secure funding for future projects. But any dollars I got, to the dollar, I'd have to sit in front of executives and say, here's where we spent the money. Here's the benefit we got. Here's where we either meet or didn't meet expectations, et cetera, et cetera. I mean,
and we're increasingly living in a time of where people are questioning, what's government's role in this? Maybe the government has no role in it. Maybe it's just research. Maybe it has no money in it. Maybe it's up to good-hearted people to do this again. I mean, we go left and right and back and forth, whether this is something that should be funded or whether this is something that's not government's role.
I actually, my mind goes there more often than not lately, right? So you look to organizations like PanCan, who will effectively take your dollars and use them to either support patients, to support families, to support research, to support clinical trials. Like this funding, the dollars that you put towards there are going to very specific things. And then they have their accountability to report back to you as a donator to say, this is how we've used your money. Similarly, one of the things I've been exploring, there's actually just a company here in Phoenix called the Cancer Fund. So they're a venture capital company that focus specifically on cancer treatments. Right? So they look for new research, new startups, new things. So there are opportunities. Now, you still can't let the accountability on the government side go, because they are allocating a significant amount of dollars. I think the numbers, they're in the billions, right? That says we are allocating these dollars towards cancer research. Okay, it's not $50,000 or $1 million. It's billions of tens of billions of dollars. How have we progressed, right?
And as Roberta always says, if we allow this just to be a market-driven decision, I'm gonna invest in fixing that cancer because there's a lot of people that have it, and I'll make a lot of money doing it. Pancreatic cancer is going to lose in that discussion because not enough have it and not enough proof of this is where I should put my money here.
That I think that's a very real concern. Um, it was funny because a discussion last week, someone had said that the reason why there's not such a focus on pancreatic cancer is because everybody dies anyway.
Right.
That's a callous statement, but it's a true statement. And it goes back to the example of the prostate cancer that I brought up, right? Out of 200,000 people who get prostate cancer, 30,000 will die. Now, that sucks. That's a terrible number. 1 plus anything is a terrible number for someone to die from cancer. But because there is the ability to catch it before it gets worse, and there are the abilities and the therapies that are treating it effectively, and because they can study what happens on the other side of someone who comes out of treatment successfully, that fosters more research dollars.
And more advocates running around saying, I'm here because of your support. I made it. Please help others. If there are few voices on the other end, that's part of the problem of sharing the good news and getting people enlisted in this. Oh, whatever it is, 97%, what's the 87% or something are going to die. That's not a large advocacy group out telling the world, back this, do this, it's working, we're getting better, we need your help, jump on board. People want to feel like there's some hope. They want to feel like it's moving in some direction.
Well, we are, but it's been slow, unfortunately. And then now this year, not to have an increase at all is a little disappointing. And is this pause the government is putting on research, is that going to affect us? I know it will affect, the cancer world, but I'm more concerned, unfortunately, for the pancreatic cancer community because that's in my heart, and that's what has affected me the most. And you were talking about prostate cancer, which when we first started advocacy, prostate cancer and pancreatic cancer had the worst survival rates. They were like 98% were going to die. Once they did the early detection, they came out with that blood test for prostate cancer. Now it's almost 98% are going to survive, and that's awesome. Right. And that's what we need, the early detection, something with the research. And but yeah, you make some very good points. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's why I'm here. I think it's important. So
we're down to the last couple of minutes. What would you say to somebody then to get them off the couch, to get them to take action? Assuming many listeners are obviously dealing with it right now. Many people listen to the show have pancreatic cancer, know somebody has pancreatic cancer. That's why they're listening. I get it. But how do they then get their friends and neighbors and other people to
I think they first things first, right? Call your state representative, even your governor's office, whatever. What is going on here? What is happening? This is why it's important to me. And this is why it's important to communities. One thing. 2, look at the different group. PanCan, is a great place to donate and to make a difference. There are local communities. Here we have the Jennifer Peterson Foundation that takes in donations and looks for opportunities to either help PanCan or help different hospitals and stuff fund their research, right? So making that decision to say, how can I help? How can I be tactical and provide dollars to places where they're going to go? And also making sure that the government understands, okay, great, you're taking some time to evaluate this stuff. Every day someone's going to die.
Yeah.
Right? Every day someone is going to get sicker. And next year, when you could have been 6 to 12 months ahead on a particular therapy, on a particular item or whatever, you're now going to be 12 months behind, which means another year of 52,000 pancreatic cancer deaths.
And of course, I say you got to put a face to it. That's what this show's about, and that's what Roberta even says. When they took faces along to Congress, results happened.
Yeah,
when it was all stats and numbers and pleas, people yawned and said, "Next time," you know.
No, it made a big difference to tell our personal story, and when you can make your representative or their aide cry, then you've hit them.
I hate to put it that way, but yeah,
no, but it
it's
was
emotional,
important 'cause,
right?
yeah, the statistics did nothing. We just gave them numbers, and they were like, "Yeah, fine, that's like everything else." But once we started sharing our personal story and showing them photos, it really hit home to them, and that's when we made a
Connected to them,
difference.
a real difference.
I'm sorry, I think we are out of time.
We're
but,
out of time here. I got
Rob
another.
will do a dedication. I'm going to allow him to do the dedication. As long as you speak my name, I shall live forever is dedicated to
Giacomo Santaramo. Jack and I got introduced last year. He was a friend of a friend from my hometown of Toronto. My age, a few kids, very well respected in the business community. 56 years old, he gets diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Through a lot of, I guess, complicated iterations through the Canadian medical system, which is a whole separate topic. His treatments and therapies seem to be delayed a lot. He passed back in November. Very strong man, very good man, but was taken away from us way too early. So Jack Santaramo, this is for you.
Thank you.
Well, this is for all of us who know anybody or have had experience with living with a deadly disease like pancreatic cancer. It is about putting a face to it, and we hope that you'll join us as we continue to put a face to it and bring along the facts and ideas and all that goes with this thing we call living hope, this journey with pancreatic cancer. If you're on the journey, starting the journey, know somebody who's in the journey, you want information, lots of places we talk about it all the time. Let's shout out the one that we started with, pancan.org. You can call them and get information, 877-2-PANCAN for the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. For the OC Talk Radio Network, I'm Paul Roberts. Thanking you for joining us, hoping you'll ride along more this year as we continue to take this journey together and find new ways to bring living hope. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.